Hi there, for MNVA Geography, this is Mrs. Hatterberg continuing our discussion on governments. We're moving into 3.2 Study 3, talking about tribes and nations. Governments are sovereign with their territory, as you've seen, but that doesn't mean they're permanent fixtures. In fact, governments change as a result of wars, revolutions, and illegal takeover. Recently, US-led invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq have created new governments in those countries, but the task of building nations is far from easy. Afghanistan. Afghanistan got a new democratic government in 2002 after the overthrow of the Taliban, an Islamic extremist group that had ruled the country since it took control of the capital in 1996. From 1996 until 2002, the Taliban was the official government of Afghanistan. Still, it wasn't until 2000 the Taliban was able to extend control to 95% of the country. Even then, they were groups of people that still fought against them. Why did the Taliban have trouble taking control of this country? You've seen before that Afghanistan has had a long history of conflict and political turmoil. The population of Afghanistan is divided among four major ethnic groups and several smaller groups, as shown by the map above, which, that's not a map, it's flags. Ethnic and tribal conflict has been a central feature of Afghan history and continues to affect the country today. Young democratic government of Afghanistan faces the same challenges that previous governments have faced, uniting a diverse set of clans, tribes, and ethnic groups in one nation state. Only time will tell if they will be successful or if the age-old tensions will be too strong. Afghanistan is not alone in facing this task. Many nations around the world are divided by ethnic and cultural conflicts that make building and maintaining a nation difficult. Page 2 of 6. Unification. Tension between different tribes and ethnic groups isn't just a problem for new governments. Many societies today are still informally governed by tribes, clans, and/or other traditional organizations. This creates conflict between groups in power and groups that want power. This conflict isn't new. In fact, the tension between ethnicities and national identity has been a problem since the birth of the modern nation-state in Europe in the 17th century. Countries as united as Spain, Germany, and Italy were once divided among different, often warring groups. These groups sometimes shared a language or history, but they were also divided by important differences in religion, culture, politics, and physical geography. It was difficult to get these different groups to consider themselves united as Spaniards or Germans or Italians. Unification was often bloody and full of conflict. Nationalism. Many of the nation states you see on the map were created as a result of nationalism. By focusing on one or two obvious traits, like language, nationalists were able to convince many people that other differences between tribes and groups were less important than the similarities. Despite the difficulties of unifying people with strong cultural and ethnic, religious, and political differences, most nations on Earth today have succeeded in creating unity. Still, others have not been successful. These nations continue to struggle with tensions that produce violent conflict, and it's far from certain what will happen to them. Page 3 out of 6. Resisting change. Unification of people and territory isn't automatic. Different ethnic groups don't always develop into a single nation state. In fact, forming a central government often leads to major problems in places where there are deep tribal or ethnic divisions, and cultural tradition plays a major role in government. One problem that's created involves sharing power. Typically, tribal or clan leaders exercise power without much opposition, but when tribes and clans are grouped together into larger political units, such as nation states, they are forced to share power and compete with others to control the political outcomes. Another problem is that those in power often have economic advantage over those who are not in power. This advantage is usually gained through corruption. Sharing a part of the government with other groups would limit the amount of economic advantage of those in power. If they aren't used to resolving political differences peacefully, tribal and clan leaders often resort to violence rather than political debate to settle their disagreements. The transition to a peaceful representative system is often difficult or impossible for traditional power holders. This shows that the power and importance of tradition. People may always be on the move in this world, but cultures are often strongly resist change. This is particularly true of cultural leaders, whose power often relies on keeping things the way they are. the source of the problem. Log on to page 4 out of 6 to complete this self-check. Page 5, the difficulty of unification. Here's another self-check for you. And page 6, summary. Nation building. Building a nation is more than forming a government and raising a flag. It requires creating a unified people where there may be a long history of disagreement, rivalry, and hatred. This difficulty is visible today in post-Saddam Hussein Iraq, a country composed of 3 different ethnic groups: Sunni Muslims, Shiite Muslims, and Kurds. A U.S.-led invasion overthrew Saddam Hussein's totalitarian regime in 2003. That resulted in a complex civil war among ethnic groups and local militias. The United States military is trying to make it possible for an Iraqi government to take power and rule the country without U.S. military support. So far, they have failed. Rival militias continue to battle one another in foreign military forces, and the future of Iraq is uncertain. Possible solutions in Iraq. Some people think that Iraq would be better off partitioned into 3 separate countries, one for each of the different ethnic groups. Others point out that this would be a recipe for ongoing war and turmoil that might spill over into other nearby countries. Also, these groups live among each other throughout the territory of Iraq, not in separate ethnic areas that could easily be divided by new national boundaries. It's a difficult political problem and one that has no easy solution.